Hello everybody, welcome to my Leo season 2020 presentation. We are in our first 24 hours of Leo season for this year. The sun ingressed into Leo last night, in the evening, just before sunset, Western Australian time, and we get to enjoy the sun in its home sign of Leo until the 22nd of August. So yeah, 2020 continues with all the dominant themes of the time. I might get rid of my video because I think it's a little glitchy, so I'll just endeavour to share my slideshow. This first image is from Uranus. I've been sharing his series of zodiac paintings throughout my presentations this year. So I'm continuing in that vein. I'm going to stop my video now. Okay. And it's done it again. It's frozen it again. Oh, why is it doing this? Pause the recording. Okay, it seems to be working again now. I'm not sure what's going on with the tech. Not my favourite aspect of doing this. Okay, so yes, the salute to the sun. Indeed, we can honour the sun beautifully in the northern hemisphere. Of course, it's like midsummer now. Down here in Australia, it's midwinter, which is a totally different vibe, but the sun is shining this morning and I'm going to go with that. Yes, the ongoing shitfuckery that is 2020 continues to unfold, and it is not what I really want to say, and what I really hope people hear is how what's going on in 2020 doesn't need to be without a purpose. So what we can observe in the collective and also in our personal lives, it can mean something, and we can use the challenges to essentially, what I think is the most important thing that we do with challenges in our lives is get to know ourselves better, in terms of not like a simplification of who we are, but actually like the opposite, a complexification of who we are and the many dimensions that we have, and how our natures are paradoxical, how we can be very different people from one moment to the next, or even within one moment. So that's not an easy thing to do gracefully, but it is the sun and Leo that helps us to sort of bring together in a cohesive whole the self that that we are becoming. So we had the second Cancer new moon of the year a few days ago, and so this Leo season commences off the back of that Cancer new moon, which means this lunar month is under that energy of that Cancer, that inward kind of experience. Cancer and Leo are the most subjective signs of the zodiac, and so we take when we move from Cancer to Leo, we take the inner experience and express it in a way that is sort of adheres to our authenticity, and it's a juggle, to be true to ourselves, to be authentic, and to also take on board the experiences and perspectives of others. So we, yeah, without necessarily getting too affected by others and what others might think or say or believe, or all of those things come into play with Leo. So as well, we've got Venus emerging from shadow, commencing her long descent. So she is now in the morning, in the dawn sky, beautiful at her maximum elongation almost, and she's still in the shadow zone of her, where her retrograde took place. That will be fully complete in this Leo season. There are also insights emerging into consciousness in the wake of the Mercury retrograde, and Mercury remains in the shadow zone of the retrograde too. But there's certainly things coming to light. Mercury is also in the dawn sky, a little trickier to spot, the trickster, but certainly there. And as well, I wanted to mention and pay homage to the minor asteroid Arachne, who is in late Leo, I think around 28 degrees of Leo, and sort of guiding us forward through this year. Arachne is, of course, the mortal girl who was turned into a spider by Pallas Athena, and she is weaving the web of life always, and sort of, for me, represents the threads of our lives and the ways that they intertwine in a beautiful and magical and incredible kind of way. So there are some significant moments that I want to mention. Jupiter retrograde sextile to Neptune retrograde at 20 degrees of Capricorn and Pisces on the 28th of July. And that sextile occurred in February, and it will occur direct again in October. And that the cycle between Jupiter and Neptune began in Aquarius in May of 2009. So it can be worth reflecting on these larger cycles to see what's sort of coming through. And certainly the energy now is waning of that cycle, so they're coming back together, getting closer and closer again for the revivification of that cycle again. But yes, there is the sextile is quite a interesting kind of energy. It's quite exciting and edgy, and there can be a real Neptune and Jupiter can sort of speak the same language in a lot of ways, and when they're both retrograde too, there can be like a real synchronicity that it's worth being aware of. So in the closing days of the month, it's really active now, but exact on the 28th of July. Amidst all what else is going on, it's hard to discern and necessarily separate what, especially with Neptune in Pisces, it's quite a blur, but just need to be, I need to be aware of it. I like to mention that because it's part of the ongoing larger cycles that are the backdrop for 2020 and ongoing into the future. So the asteroid goddess Vesta will ingress Leo on the 11th of August, which is Vesta's been very present throughout all of this year, and what's been going on, especially since the zodiacal new year with the sun's ingress into Aries, and so the retrogrades of the year, and with the personal planets Venus and Mercury, there's been a real, for me, that theme has been around amidst all the chaos that's ongoing within the world and even within our personal lives, remaining true to our inner flame and what it is that gives our lives purpose and meaning, and having that as a kind of guiding light in a way. Vesta is the hearth fire, and Vesta and her virgins tend to the sacred fires and don't let them go out. There are grave consequences for the virgin who allows the fire to go out, and I think that's true for us all. We suffer when we let that fire burn out. So yeah, I think that's it's good to keep an eye on all the asteroids actually, and particularly the major four, but they're just so interesting, all the minor asteroids too. They always add another dimension of incredible, just mind-blowing how astrology works and how it's the macrocosm and the microcosm. It's so cool. So anyway, keep going. So the North Lunar Node conjoins with the minor asteroid Chaos at 27 of Gemini, which is hardly surprising, and it you know, again, it just adds another layer to that, what's obviously already chaos in the world, times of such uncertainty. But to me, the fact of the conjunction with the North Node, which sort of indicates our path forward, our kind of destiny, our evolutionary good idea to sort of work towards, is chaos being that from which we have all come, from which everything has come. Everything has come out of this void of chaos, and everything returns to that. It's like the eternal truth of like order and disorder, and how the two are intertwined and dynamic, and the cause of all creation and destruction. And it's an amazing synchronicity that it sort of underscored what I was thinking about the astrology of the year, and really put an exclamation point when I found that that asteroid was involved. So and the moon is in Gemini concurrently at the same time as that, and the sun will then go on to sextile both of the North Lunar Node and the asteroid Chaos around the 20th of August. So that could be a little moment of excitement. Uranus goes retrograde from 10 degrees of Taurus back to 6 degrees from the 16th of August until January 2021. So that is another interesting thing to bring in the fixed signs and what's unfolding in our charts in those houses of our charts. There can be a different pace to things, and Uranus at the best of times is unpredictable and volatile, and when retrograde, arguably more so. So that's just something to be aware of, and we'll continue to keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the year. And as well, I wanted to mention that there are many quincunxes this solar season, this month. So they are the 150 and 210 degree aspects. So that is just a period of adjustment. So I'm thinking, I'm not a fortune teller, but I'm thinking that this month it begins to heat up again next month. And this month is very interesting in and of itself, but perhaps there's a little more breathing room. I'm a little cautious to say that because I'm not really a predictive astrologer, but I definitely think that we are given the opportunity this month to look at things in all their uncertainness and having no idea of where we're going to go next and what's going to happen, and just being a little open to the possibilities and recognizing that we can make adjustments. Okay, so this beautiful painting is by Henri Matisse, who has Leo rising and the Sun, Mercury and Mars in Capricorn. And this quote comes from Marion Woodman, who has the Sun, Moon, Mercury and Neptune all in Leo. What we see in women's mysteries is the process by which contradiction is transformed into paradox. That transformation is the work of the feminine, an invisible center encountered only in a creative process, at first not consciously recognized, but gradually revealed as the process unfolds. When Matisse put to himself the question, "Do I believe in God?" he replied, "Yes, when I am working." Nature is at once unchanging and in continuous change. That quote comes from the book Addiction to Perfection by Marion Woodman, and I just really loved how it brought together these two Leonine people who and you know, Henri Matisse and all of that Capricorn energy as well, and how he gives words to that working, that the need for work. And Capricorn, I remember saying last year about 2020 about how we needed to be prepared to work, that it wasn't going to be a year of fun. And in some ways it's kind of ironic in a way, because some people are out of work, but the work I was really talking about and continue to talk about is not the work of, although not to denigrate the day job, because there's something important that occurs in our day job lives as well, but the life's work kind of thing, building something like Capricorn wants to do, leaving a legacy and sort of climbing that mountain. And Leo and Capricorn are in that awkward quincunx kind of relationship, where there's like constant sort of adjustment needing to be made, but I think that they can work together very beautifully, and we see it in the work of Henri Matisse, who has such a massive, created so much beauty in his life, and gave that creative expression a real I mean, that was his legacy. He's created so much beauty that came, and it's very diverse. His creativity really evolved with him as a person, and I really love that as an idea of the energies that we're working with this month, which are largely, well, there's a lot going on with Aries as well, of course, but yeah, bringing Leo and Capricorn together. So as I mentioned, the Cancer new moon a few days ago will lead us into the Aquarius full moon, and I listened, attended Michael Mead's most recent online event the other day, and he was talking about outsiders and as being those people who transmit ideas, inspiration, innovation and healing from what he calls the unseen world, and as kind of messengers between this world, which really reminded me of Mercury in Cancer and Mercury retrograde in Cancer that we've just had, and how things often seem like they don't make sense. They and things might not feel as though they fit, or it's irrational, or crazy even, but, and you know, like I think of the word lunatic being like a derivative of Luna and the moon, and the relationship between our crazy times and the moon's phases and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that idea into this because I think there is that aspect to Aquarius, the exile, the outcast. So he talked about how these people are known in India as outcasts and are likened to hermit crabs who move from shell to shell and periodically outgrow and shed their exoskeleton, which of course is known as molting. And while they're in that phase, they do risk complete annihilation in a vulnerable state, like without a shell. Bad enough going from shell to shell when you've got an exoskeleton, but when you've got nothing at all, you are so vulnerable and exposed. And that is very much to do with the Cancer archetype, that very exposed vulnerability, and it's not a comfortable place to be, and that's why crabs have a shell, and that's why Cancer needs defenses, because of that sensitivity underlying their nature. It's inherent in all of us. You know, we all have a moon, we all have a fourth house, and we all have Cancer somewhere in our charts, so we are all susceptible to this hypersensitive kind of thing in some aspect of our lives, some more than others, of course. But essentially what that brings or brought me to is, you know, whether we acknowledge it or not, we are all in this together. And that's being said a lot with the COVID-19 thing, how we're all in this together. And it's never been more apparent how connected we all are, given the global pandemic that we're living through now. And like the social media world as well, and how viral things go in that kind of sense, and you know, the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that social justice kind of themes as well, that all, you know, brings it home to how connected we all are, and that continues to unfold this month. Leo and the elephant in the room. So there's been a bit of controversy in the online astrological community in the last few weeks, and it has to do a lot with one of my teachers who has many planets in Leo, and he was, among other things, accused of narcissism. So Leo can be the most beautiful energy. It's like the warm sun, you know, like it feels glorious when you're bathing in that warm sun and that warm glow and that inclusive energy of the high road kind of Leo, or you know, the happy Leo, perhaps I should say. And that spontaneity and the playfulness and the fun and all of that, you know, as well as the need for performance and applause and the inherent kind of attraction to drama, all those kinds of things. And the bold and creative aspect of Leo, because essentially it is about that creative expression, the creative self-expression. So yeah, all of these wonderful positive sides to Leo, but Leo of course has a shadow like any other sign or planet or energy, and largely that has to do with like a narcissistic tendency. And I was a little confused, I guess, as to how astrologers could criticize someone with so much Leo energy for having narcissistic tendencies. Because we are all in that boat to some degree. We are subjective creatures, you know, with the Cancer Leo part of our charts, the sun and moon, you know, the luminaries. We are living from our subjective experience, even if we're very good at doing our Aquarius. You know, like even if we can be quite objective and non-attached, and we're very good at that kind of spiritual practice, or perhaps even spiritual bypassing, it can be in some cases dissociating, you know, and therefore not getting drawn into the kind of narcissism traits necessarily. But even saying that, there's not, the two can certainly coexist. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to recognize and not be in denial of this narcissistic tendency, but also to be cautious of throwing the first stone, because we all have that quality to some extent. And isn't that elephant beautiful? I'm not sure it's completely ethical, but yeah. So this as well, this quote comes from, it's a quote from Barbara Hanna, who was the biographer of Carl Jung. And so this is from her book, The Animus, and she quotes Jung in this quote. So they are both Leos. That Carl Jung had the Sun in Leo, and Barbara Hanna had Sun, Mars, and Chiron in Leo. And the image is from Carl Jung. Long after we have realized the existence of both the personal and collective unconscious, and are quite aware that we have a shadow and an animus or an anima, we find ourselves behaving exactly as if we did not know it at all. When it comes to realizing that the psyche itself extends far beyond our ego and its conscious knowledge, we are confronted with the realization that we live, in part, in an unknown, invisible country. Jung said, "It is as if you were ruler of a land which is only partially known to yourself, king of a country with an unknown number of inhabitants. And the greater your experience, the more you see that your corner is infinitely small in comparison with the vast extent of the unknown against you." Which sort of brings in Aquarius in its fragmentational, fragmented kind of aspect, and of course the referring to being the ruler of a land, Leo is the king or the queen, certainly the monarch and royalty, and desires to be treated as such. And that's a little how our ego feels, as though it ought to be obeyed. As though, and we feel very sometimes angry, frustrated, resentful when things don't go the way our conscious self or our ego planned. And that's come up a lot in the COVID times. Perhaps the pill is a little less bitter to swallow because everybody's in the same boat and nobody's able to travel or go all over the place in a fancy free kind of lifestyle anymore. But yeah, those ego deaths that are so necessary to our individuation process are very hard for the ego, very difficult for that ruler of the land to take. And but yes, certainly a necessary part. And just to recognize that we are vast on the inner, and I always marvel at the vastness, the sky above at night, and all that blackness, and the stars, the points of consciousness up there. Yeah, there's a lot of black, there's a lot of unknown. So the sun in aspect this month, I'll just run through these briefly. I wasn't going to speak to all of them. So the sun trines Chiron on the 1st of August and goes on to square Uranus on the 2nd of August. They're just so that's at 9 and 10 degrees respectively. And then we begin to move into that quincunx territory, the sun quincunx series on the 2nd of August as well, and Pallas Athena on the 7th of August. And I'm just going to skip over Juno for a minute and talk about the quincunx between the Sun and Jupiter and the Sun and Pluto, because those series, Pallas Athena, Jupiter and Pluto, were all, and Mercury was also there too, were all involved at the in the mid-January Capricorn. So the Pluto-Saturn conjunction that also involved Ceres and Mercury and the Sun, and as well Jupiter was co-present, and Pallas Athena was not far away, I believe, still in Sagittarius, but not just about to ingress Capricorn. So that all harkens back to that time, which was sort of the beginning of coronavirus, unbeknownst to most of the world. So yeah, just to reflect on that in our personal lives, thinking back to what was beginning then, because it was the beginning of this new Saturn-Pluto cycle, which has been so much spoken about in the lead up to it, and in this year, as we've seen, like it's the breaking down of old structures and the rebirth of a new cycle, and what that actually means for us all. We certainly are witnessing the crumbling of old structures, and people are talking about the end of patriarchy and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's a big topic, which I don't have time to go into a lot today, but yeah. So that sextile with Juno is again, that'll be coming to its completion. That's at the end, coming closer to the end of that synod. It's on the 10th of August. Juno as well has been a key player throughout this year as our reminder to consider our other. The handle of the collective bucket is what I've been calling her, because it sort of helps to have that in the back of our minds always, to be considerate of the perspectives of others and what our significant others are going through when we're stuck in our own suffering sometimes. Yeah, so then the Sun goes on to trine Mars and Eris on the 17th of August. Oh, I skipped over the quincunx to Neptune as well. Yeah, as I said, I've already mentioned the period of adjustment. So the just taking what time we can to reflect upon our lives and what we're witnessing with it and experiencing in our own lives, bringing us to the exterior conjunction with Mercury on the 17th of August, which happens just ahead of the full moon, new moon, and the quincunx with Saturn retrograde on the 19th of August, and the sextile with the North Node and Chaos, as I mentioned earlier, on the 20th of August. This image is by another Leo, Anna Archer. She was a Danish painter. She's got some beautiful pieces available on Wiki Art in the public domain. So Mercury in Cancer will sextile Uranus on today, of course, and that's a lovely energy to tap into for insights, and that's been a repeated aspect through the retrograde of Mercury in Cancer. So yeah, perhaps availing ourselves to those bolts from the blue kind of insights that can come at times like this. Trine, the Mercury will trine Ceres, which as well has been a repeated aspect through the Mercury retrograde, and I just want to bring in the perspective of the amazing Jason Holly. He calls the Ceres retrograde a time of coming to terms with a loss of innocence as we are brought down to earth. And certainly the Ceres retrograde can be potent. It's linked as well to the Mercury retrograde of the first one of the year, which was in Pisces Aquarius, Ceres traverses that same territory, same degrees of the zodiac, so from Pisces back into about 28 of Aquarius. There's, yeah, that's if you happen to know your chart and you have energy, you know, planets, things in those, or angles around those degrees, it will be particularly potent for you to give consideration to that kind of idea. But it's definitely a theme for us all, personally and collectively. The waning square with Juno, and at the same time the moon is co-present in Libra right there, which is lovely as the crescent moon. I haven't put the date there. Sorry about that. Somewhere between the 24th and the 27th of July. And then Mercury emerges from shadow on the 27th of July and continues on his merry way and conjoins Hygeia at 15 degrees of Cancer, bringing in the health, the holistic health and healing aspect of Hygeia, and the attention to good hygiene practices and things like that. Hygiene has been a major part of this year's astrology as well, interesting, with all that hand washing and masks and all of that kind of sanitization and stuff. Hygeia had a lot to do with that. Sanitization is a major Hygeia keyword. Yeah, and Mercury in a waxing square with Mars on the 28th of July, and also opposing Pallas Athena on the same day. So that, yeah, the waxing square, that square's been active through that Mercury retrograde again, really. Certainly a big energy, and a lot of things could have come up in terms of conflict and ill-timed, perhaps, conflict, abrupt, impulsive kinds of things that sort of couldn't be kept a lid on any longer, which sometimes it's for the best in the long run, although it can be very difficult to endure and to hear things that we don't want to hear necessarily. The opposition between Mercury and Jupiter on the 30th, and also square to Black Moon Lilith and trine to Neptune at the same time. The opposition between Mercury and Pluto on the 1st of August, with the waxing gibbous moon present as well in Capricorn at the same time. So that crossover from July to August in about a week's time is a kind of flashpoint in terms of because that cycle, as I mentioned, began in January. So now we sort of come to, in a sense, the kind of full moon of that cycle, and we begin to have illuminated within ourselves consciousness around particular issues that may be able to be identified as having begun in January. So, and in the collective, perhaps we'll see something around that as well. The conjunction between Mercury and Vesta, 26 degrees on the 3rd of August, and the opposition between Saturn and Mercury on the 4th of August. So again, that cycle that began in January. Mercury in Cancer is very feeling kind of based, knowing in those watery inner realms. Then Mercury ingresses into Leo on the 5th of August. Mercury has been in Cancer since the 29th of May throughout that whole retrograde period and everything, so that's quite a long time. And then, yeah, passes through Leo quite quickly. So it's about 15 days. From the 5th of August until the 20th of August, Mercury will be in Leo and meets, so just when Mercury stationed retrograde, he was about to come into a conjunction with the minor asteroid Metis, who was at about 15 degrees of Cancer at the time, and she's just been tracking her steady course through Cancer and into Leo. They will finally have that meeting that was scheduled and never occurred at the beginning of the Mercury retrograde in June. They now get to catch up 30th of July. So Metis is the mother of Pallas Athena. She was swallowed by Zeus in the myth. And she was also the daughter of she was a Titan. She was an oceanic goddess of wise counsel. She was cunning. She was the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. So Oceanus was the god of the waters that surround the world, and Tethys is the mother who is the freshwater rivers, aquifers, the flowing kinds of fresh waters. But certainly a creature of the unconscious, and I'm like a dog with a bone with my insistence that our lessons are going to come out of that world of the unconscious, and our guidance. The unconscious is compensatory and certainly a guide, and we sort of ignore it to our peril. At our peril. Anyway, I'll continue to carry on. The exterior cazimi, that exterior conjunction with Mercury moving direct, occurs at 25 degrees of Leo on the 17th of August and activates that grand fire trine between Mars and Eris in Aries and the South Node in Sagittarius, and also will be sextile to the North Node. So that will be a very dynamic period to pay attention to. And in the dark moon phase of this lunar cycle, having begun in Cancer, leading up to the Leo new moon, which is at the end of this solar month, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then Mercury ingresses out of Leo into Virgo on the 20th of August. Venus is in Gemini and now direct, of course, having had her 43-day retrograde period where she went from the evening star to the morning star. She is now bright and beautiful in the dawn sky, and still in the sign of Gemini. So in shamanic astrology, it is likened to Inanna's descent, this period where she spends about 10 months visible as the morning star, and just ahead of the Cancer new moon, the second one, Venus met with the waning crescent moon in the dawn sky, and in shamanic astrology that is known as the moon gate, and because it was the first meeting at the highest at around Venus's maximum elongation, which is the furthest that Venus ever gets from the sun. It is the crown chakra, moon gate, and this is a beautiful cycle to engage with. That is analogous to Inanna's descent. The story of Inanna is that she goes to the underworld for a funeral, and as she must pass through 7 gates on her journey to the underworld to see her sister Ereshkigal, and at each gate she must lay down to an item of clothing or a piece of jewelry or a part of herself, essentially, and we are able to sort of embody that journey in our own lives periodically, in alignment with Venus's phase of being the morning star. And each month Venus aligns with the waning crescent moon, the crone moon, ahead of the new moon, and we can visualize that if we're lucky and willing to get out of bed a little early, and then over the coming weeks feel into what it is within us that needs to be laid down and released, sort of in alignment with whatever chakra we're working with in that month. So for this month, it is the crown chakra. And in my previous times of engaging with this kind of ritual, I've had downloads or insights around that tendency to quickly transcend things, and like essentially like that spiritual bypassing kind of tendency that can be a real thing. Yeah, so because I'm, every 19 months I engage in this process, and it's always a little bit different, but in my experience, this is what this is the theme that we can be aware of, just too quickly transcending things, rising above everything just too quickly. And this works particularly well when we're in the part of the sky that we are now, Cancer into Leo, because we need to give due reverence and honor our own experience and our own emotions and our own process, and really allow that to unfold rather than just painting ourselves as one of many and we just quickly get over our stuff, and perhaps we often do that too quickly. Okay, so the Venus will square Neptune for the third time on the 28th of July, and then finally emerges from her shadow zone on the 29th of July. This all occurred, I just wanted to refer back to the wonderful wisdom of Gary Caton, who linked this Venus retrograde to the fixed star Capella and the Charioteer constellation, and who is linked to the mythological figure of Erechthonius, who is linked again to Pallas Athena, the son of Pallas Athena, and has to do with that fertile creativity and the civilization of a culture. And we can think about that in terms of our own personal psyche as well, coming from a primitive or instinctual kind of place into a more conscious and civilized place, while maintaining integrity, authenticity, and contact with our own inner experience. Venus as well will quincunx Jupiter at the same time as being square Neptune on the 28th of July, quincunx Pluto on the 31st of July, and make the conjunction with the North Node on the 6th of August before she moves into Cancer. And that'll be a nice little window to pay attention to as well, Venus in Gemini with the North Node. And then her ingress into Cancer on the 7th of August, her maximum elongation proper is on the 14th of August, and then she'll come to her next moon gate at 7 degrees of Cancer on the so that's the third eye chakra moon gate on the 16th of August, and that I'll speak more about that next month, but just to give you a little guidance, if you've never gone through that process before, the releasing of principles, where and that's a big theme of the Capricorn stuff too, this year and in recent years, of Saturn and Capricorn essentially teaches us to be the authority of our own lives, rather than adhering to some strict preordained principles of virtuousness or moral standards, or this preconceived idea we have about what's right and wrong. Needs to be explored in the inner realm in terms of what's right for us. And relating like Venus does to the self, rather than seeking certainty, I guess, in an outer, like laws and rules and constructs that are past their use by date, really. We need to be, as we mature and grow and develop, increasingly able and willing to be guided by our own virtues. I used to be an anarchist once, but and it always boggles my mind that anarchy doesn't reign. Really. Oh, we are so rigidly adhered to defunct modes of being. Anyway, that's an exploration to take, if you want to, in alignment with this Venus descent over the next 9 to 10 months. Okay, and Mars in Aries as well. Mars is obviously gone into Aries and remains in Aries until January of 2021. It's the talk of the town in astrological circles, of course. Mars enters the shadow zone of the retrograde on the 25th of July, and then I guess shit starts to get real. Engaging in that waxing square with Pallas Athena, and on the 29th of July, that cycle began in March of 2020, and the waxing square with Jupiter. So all of these cycles began at around this point in March of 2020. So yeah, that waxing square with Jupiter on the 4th of August, the waxing square with Pluto on the 13th of August. The square is a very uncomfortable aspect, very dynamic, and it's friction, essentially, and it causes great discomfort. Saturn is in the superior position because it's mostly that Mars Saturn aspect that's troublesome through the Mars retrograde period, which we'll talk about next month. But Saturn certainly takes the reins in a sense. And for me, in the traditional astrological kind of way of thinking, that is, without getting too technical. So for me, that essentially signals our need to kind of defer to maturity if we are at all able. But Mars in Aries is not like that. Mars in Aries will rail against that and is very instinctual and impulsive, and perhaps, much as that is going to cause disruption in our lives and in the collective, it's part of what needs to occur. So hold on to your hats. I guess pick your battles is sage advice, and know when to let things go. If not for any, like to have that, what do they call it in wartime, when is it a truce, or like they take a breather sometimes, like if there is something that is fundamental to your life and your authentic being that requires you to be in a conflict, at least know when to sort of drop those defenses for a breather, as much for your own sanity as anyone else's. So yeah, And the Mars conjunction with Black Moon Lilith on the 10th of August, and then the conjunction with Eris on the 18th of August. So, and then things start to get quite intense and heavy. Yeah, the dark feminine aspect of the Mars in Aries piece of 2020. So there's a lot more to be said about that, but I've really been talking for long enough, and I've still got the lunations to address, so we will come back to that another time. The Aquarius full moon on the 3rd of August is square to Uranus, which is in direct contrast to the new moon, which was opposite Saturn. So there are harmonious aspects to Chiron and Juno Chiron in Aries and Juno in Libra with this Aquarius full moon, and the Sun will be quincunx to Ceres, so again bringing up that coming down to earth, loss of innocence theme, and Juno being there reminding us of our significant others, and Chiron being there reminding us of our fragility, our inherent vulnerabilities. Mars, Black Moon, Lilith, and Eris are all square to Pallas Athena, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, and opposite to Juno. So there's a cardinal square forming throughout the month, a cardinal grand cross, which is very dynamic and energized, and can be sort of seen under the light of this Aquarius full moon. Mercury and Vesta will be together and opposed to Saturn at this full moon, and Venus will be conjoined with the North Node at this full moon. It's a really rich time, and the asteroid Metis again is at 8 of Leo, so quite close to the full moon. So just being allowing ourselves that little bit of space to hear that aspect of everything, the wisdom underneath the conflict, sort of having integrity, and awareness of the long game, like not cutting off our nose to spite our face is kind of what I think about it, because Aquarius is volatile, Uranus is volatile. It's easy to get heated under the light of a full moon, especially with all this dynamic energy involving Mars and Black Moon Lilith and Eris. Oh my God. So yes, it's quite intense, but allowing and the devotion to emotion is what I've written. Honoring our own stuff, being guided by that unconscious, and somehow not overwhelmed by it. So using whatever life raft you have in that sense. So rather than getting really swept up in the emotion of it, maintaining some sense of perspective through whatever practice you've got. So for me, it's usually astrology or Jungian depth psychology, that allows me to maintain some kind of, buoyancy and optimism, and being able to look ahead at the long game. But yeah, certainly there's creativity to tap into with this full moon. It's quite beautiful in that sense, and perhaps being like allowing that difficult energies that come up to be sublimated into a creative kind of project of some kind. Just to Barack Obama, who has Jupiter in Aquarius rising and Mercury, Sun, Uranus, North Node all in Leo, this is perhaps some very good wisdom of his, which he shared. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek, which is good Aquarius full moon wisdom. And just to honour what's going on in the world with social justice and wokeness, which is a dirty word, and privilege, I just wanted to give voice to this idea that identity politics exists because everyone wants to feel like they matter, because we all have Sun and we all have Leo, but sometimes runs the risk of playing at the oppression Olympics. Who has it worse off? Who suffered most? And if you have privilege, that means your life has been inherently good, which is a very oversimplified look at anyone's existence. That comes from a woman, she's a black woman, an English woman, Ayeshat Akanbi. I hope I've pronounced that okay. Anyway, she went viral on YouTube with her a bit of a rant about identity politics and wokeness and that sort of thing, which, you know, a couple of years ago it was, but I think it's a good point that she makes. And it comes to me that we can't be blamed for the circumstances into which we are born, but surely we are obliged to make good use of whatever privilege we do have. That is so important, I think. And this beautiful image is from Albert Namatjira, who has Sun in Leo. It's called Stanley Chasm, and this quote is from J.K. Rowling, who has Sun in Leo as well. Imagination is not only the uniquely human capacity to envision that which is not, and therefore the fount of all invention and innovation. In its arguably most transformative and revelatory capacity, it is the power that enables us to empathize with humans whose experience we have never shared. Which for me says so much about this solar month, this lunar month, cycles that are unfolding in the next 4 weeks or so. And the Leo new moon, ahead of the Leo new moon, the crone moon conjoins Vesta, and there is so much to discuss between these two wise women. And then the new moon on the 19th of August at 26 degrees of Leo is in a separating conjunction with Mercury, following the Cazimi on the 17th, as we already spoke about, and that activation of that grand fire trine. And the North Node being conjunct Chaos again will be activated at this new moon and into appropriately into Virgo season on the other side of this month. So what it brings to me is that what we don't know might be the thing that saves us, and allowing ourselves to be open to mystery, that the unconscious can act as our guide, without a doubt. Yeah, and finally, the last couple of things, the minor asteroid Hephaestus at 26 of Taurus, being square to that new moon. Hephaestus is the lame and rejected child who was has connections to Athena, as they co-parented Erychthonius, who was the serpent god or serpent man, not a god, but yes, he was raised by Oceanids, which brings in that unconscious aspect. He was lame and rejected by his mother and abandoned, and so just allowing that aspect of ourselves, our own lameness and rejectedness. Creative self-expression does call for our vulnerability to our own brokenness. We are all inherently broken and wounded. And as well, the asteroid Dionysus is at 29 degrees of Taurus and about to ingress Gemini. And James Hillman wrote a lot about Dionysus. The quote here, "The self divided is precisely where the self is authentically located. Authenticity is the perpetual dismemberment of being and not being, a being that is always in many parts, like a dream with a full cast. In the Dionysian portrayal, we are composed of agonies, not polarities." So that discomfort, that place of dismemberment, and as well Dionysus to do with the ecstatic and the dancing and the Maenads, or the Bacchae, his troop of women devotees. And this quote as well from Hillman, "The change that is indicated by Dionysus is one where female is not added to or integrated by male, rather the image shows an androgynous consciousness where male and female are primordially united." And these quotes come from Henri Matisse, who because the new moon is conjunct his ascendant. So I thought I would honour him with this beautiful cat with red fish painting. Creativity takes courage, he says. Drawing is like making an expressive gesture with the advantage of permanence. I do not literally paint that table, but the emotion it produces upon me. Derive happiness in oneself from a good day's work, from illuminating the fog that surrounds us. And finally, exactitude is not truth. Lots to ponder there. And this beautiful quote from a hero of mine, Anthony Bourdain, who had Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus in Leo rising. He was a Cancer sun. He said, things got broken, things got lost, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And that is the most beautiful wisdom I can think of to say goodbye with. The image is by Henri Matisse again. It is Icarus. And thank you so much for listening, and I wish you well for the month ahead. I'm available through my website, zodiac.com, ZO-DIAC.com, for readings, consultations, and general chit-chat. Thank you very much.